Hello, friends, and happy Saturday. I'm here with some really great people, and we're going to be talking about Book 5, The Wolves of Calla, by Stephen King, the Dark Tower series. And we've got those of you who are just joining. This will be spoilery. If you've not been following on our journey, we are going to just go into spoilers. We're not going to do a non-spoiler part of this video. So if you haven't read the Dark Tower books before this or this one, you probably want, and you don't want to be spoiled, you probably want to go look at our other videos for the starting with the Gunslinger. So those of you who have joined us, you might recognize some of the faces on the screen here today, but we do have some new faces as well to my channel. So we'll do some quick introductions, starting with Brandy. Brandy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Brandy, and sans Steve right now. He got me into this, and I really love it, but Steve didn't. But I did inherit his collection, so that's exciting. And yeah, I just read with Steve and everybody else, these guys, and I don't have a channel, and I just hang out.
It's awesome, though. So I guess I'll go next. My name's Ursi, and my channel is called Cersei's Booked, where I talk about all different kinds of books. I just recently did Encanto, some movies, so I'm all over the place. I just like to have fun and just share this fun hobby with everyone. So you guys can come hang out on my channel too, but I'm really excited to be here and joining along with you guys on the Dark Tower series.
I guess I'll go next. My name is Joseph Carroll. I write under the pen name J.R. Carroll, author, mail carrier, many other functions. So.
And, Joseph is new to the Dark Tower's ka-tet, so thank you, Joseph, for joining us.
Yeah.
Having me.
And of course, Jeff Lane.
Yes, I'm Jeff Lane. Joseph stole my joke. We're on the same wavelength, though. That's good.
Right.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Lane, Booyah, and I'll just use some Calla language, and that's all. But yeah, I write books and raise family and do all sorts of fun things.
Well, thank you guys for joining today. I think there's a lot to talk about in this book. Those of you who are watching in the chat, go ahead and let us know who's here and what you thought of Wolves of the Calla while we talk about our initial feelings about it. So, Jeff, this is definitely your a reread for you. Is this a reread for anybody else here on the screen?
First time through.
Well, first time. Joseph, you didn't reread, but you have read this.
Yeah, it's a month or two, but yeah, okay. I've only went through once. Yeah.
All right, so Jeff, we're going to start with you. What did you think of your reread through this?
I love it. I'm almost sure this is my favorite book in the series, which is ironic because the first time I read through the series, this was one of my least favorite books in the series. But I think I discovered upon my first reread, the second time I read it, I was like, I really like this book. And then the more I read it, the more I just like how it, just all of the ticking clocks that are set up and just the way that all the planning has to happen and everything is kind of kept in suspense from you, the reader. So I love it.
Nice. And Joseph?
Well, my initial thoughts, this probably, and I guess like I said last time, is, I'm weird. Like, the Gunslinger is still my favorite. And I feel like this is probably my second favorite book because it's very similar to the Gunslinger in ways. I mean, it's a huge book, so there's a lot of different moving parts, but especially when you get into Calvin Sturgis and he starts interacting, and of course I love a good like siege story. So this is kind of ends up being, and I'm a sucker for those type of stories. So it was right up my alley.
Awesome. How about you, Ursi?
Well, this was my first time reading this one, and I had a lot of fun with this one. It was definitely different from what I expected, because how The Wizard in Glass was a very stationary book, because we're kind of going into the past. I was like, okay, the next one we're out, like we're moving, we're gonna make some movement. That's what I was expecting. And then to just kind of be in this one town and then still get backstory, it was different from what I expected, but I still really liked it. Like I really enjoyed hearing about Callahan and like his stuff, like all the stuff that he's got going on. Like I never read Salem's Lot or anything. Now I have to go back and read it. But it was still really cool. It's very different from what I expected. Like I said, I was ready to be like, we're about to be out. Like we're on a mission to this tower, but it was still very satisfying. Like I really loved where this story went anyways. And it was a surprise, but it was still a lot of fun. I liked it. How about you,
Brandy?
Oh, there's so much. I really love this one. It's up there with Wizard and Glass for me. Wizard and Glass was my favorite. It's just a different favorite. I have to say though, back to what Cersei was saying about Salem's Lot, I am so glad one of you, I can't remember which one, said read Salem's Lot first. And I did, because I would have been so mad, because it's just
ruins the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm spoiled, but it's okay.
It was like, not only did you, it was like part 2 of Salem's Lot for me. Like I got to know
like a prequel,
afterwards, and there was a whole. So in that vein, I found like a whole list of things I should read before Wolves of the Calla. So I had myself a little Stephen King-a-thon at the beginning of the month, and I did Everything's Eventual. There's a story there about the Little Sisters of Illyria, which I'm glad I read. It was just sort of mentioned in this book, but I knew what happened, so I was excited, because I go through all these books not really getting the references. And then I did what was the other one? Another short. Oh, Everything's Eventual. No, I said that already. Hearts in Atlantis, which I'm so glad I read before this too, because I would have not picked up on some of that reference. So anyway, back to, I really liked it. It was a different good. It was exciting, and I didn't, it's huge, but I didn't feel like it was daunting, or it was just like excited about how much book I was getting from it. There are a couple criticisms I have, but we'll get there.
Yeah, it did read fast, right? Like it read a lot faster than what I thought it would too.
Still really liked it.
Yeah.
So I'm probably going to be the unpopular opinion here, although not too much. I liked it. It's still a fantastic book. But compared to the others, I think it's just because at this point I'm ready for them to be on the journey. Like Ursi was saying, that her expectations were that we would have, moved on. And so I kept waiting for, that's what I've been waiting for 5 books, is for them to actually be moving toward, I think my favorite so far was, oh my gosh, do I have them here? I don't have them here. What was the third book?
The Wastelands.
The Wasteland, because they were actually moving forward.
Yeah.
They're or at some point they were part of the way, and then in the beginning of Wizard and Glass, they continued to move through Kansas, and I was excited about that. And then we got 600 pages of backstory. And so I was ready for this one to be, okay, they're back on the road, and they were. And then it's like, oh, but we're going to stop here for 600 pages and meet Father Callahan and then fight the wolves. And so it was a great story. It's just, I think I'm at that point now. I'm kind of like, okay, you told me this was going to be a long journey. You told me that time keeps stopping. It's like, I have 2 more books, and when are we going to get to the Dark Tower? When are we going to even be, moving towards the Dark Tower? And I also have to say, in Stephen King fashion, there were some tangents here. There were some things where I thought took too long to come to the point. So I still enjoyed it. I'm not, unlike Steve, I will not be dropping off. I will finish the series.
Poor Steve.
but
He feels so bad.
Well, if it's not your thing, it's not your thing, right? Stephen King, even when his stories aren't what you're expecting, they're still written so well. His characters are so well rounded that when he goes on tangents and you're kind of like, okay, I need you guys to get back on the path, literally, in the series. But it's hard to say that I didn't enjoy learning more about Father Callahan. It's not to say I didn't enjoy this whole town that I really got to learn about. And seeing our ka-tet in the situations, really taking on the mantle of gunslinger in this book was amazing. It was just felt like it could have been a much shorter book, and that. So I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. I can't say I loved it. I can't say it was my favorite, but I could see why it would be others. So
I think this series is a good one for people that really stick to that mantra of it's not the destination, it's the journey. Or those people that say, I never want a book to end. I don't want this, I don't want the end to come. Because I don't think Stephen King wanted the end to come either when he was writing this. So he's like, well, let's do a side adventure. Let's do a side quest. Let's stay with these people as long as we can.
Yeah, it almost feels like a a novel version of like Skyrim, where it's like, oh, we know where the destination at the end of the game is, but you just keep getting pulled off. And like she says, not to say that they're not, great side stories, but yeah, I feel like that's kind of how he was doing it. That's another reason why the books were so big. It's because he was flushing out the world more on these side stories, but yeah, you can get a little bit where it's like, well, you're telling us that this is where we're going, but you're purposely pulling us away a little bit. But I actually think he did a little bit better job in this book doing the backstory of Father Callahan and not making it seem like you're getting pulled so far away. Because like in Whispering Glass, the side story, the backstory was the story almost. Where in this one, Father Callahan's story became the side story, but it wasn't all in one chunk really. Because you'd come back and do a couple other things, and then he'd come back and tell you a little bit more. Which I enjoyed that more than just being stuck in the backstory the whole time.
Even Roland was like, all right, get the story going, come on.
Twirling of the fingers.
He's like, come on, let's go.
It's so funny that, Joseph, that you said it. You brought up Skyrim, because that's exactly how I explained this series to my husband. I was like, it's a great story. That there's like a main storyline, but every town you come to, instead of just moving through, it's like in Skyrim, you got to do 50 quests before you can move on to the next thing. And so I love those games, but I'm also the kind of person that I'm like, okay, what quests do I have to do, and what quests, when I get to a point, it's like I just want to get to the end. At first it's like, oh, I love exploring all this stuff and meeting all these new characters, and then book 5, it's like, okay, yeah. But Stephen King does a great job here, because even though you have all these side quests, and even though there's a main storyline, in this book alone, there's so much character growth for every single person on this ka-tet. So I can't really say this was not a bad book. I just can't say it was my favorite. And only because I think I'm just exhausted.
Oh no.
I'm just like, And that's not just because of this. I've read a lot of books over the last few months, and I probably just overdid it. And these are so big, and maybe doing one of these a month is a bit much. And so when I got to this, I wasn't really excited to read it. I was kind of like, okay, I got to get to that next Dark Tower. And so that puts you in a mindset that I think if I went back and reread this, I'd probably enjoy it a lot more, because I felt like I was like, okay, get on with it. And it wasn't until the end that I went, you know what? I really missed a lot of things. I didn't really get to absorb what was happening as much as I would have if I'd slowed down, stopped rushing through it. And so my overall feelings of it were, yeah, it was good, but that's because I was like, oh, come on. And then you get to the end, you're like, oh shit. Maybe I should have paid more attention.
I think that's what happened with Steve with The Wizard in Glass, because he read that in like a week. Like,
yeah, he forced himself through it. Yeah,
and it can be a lot. It can be a lot, though. They're big books, and they're really a lot of stories. And I think having that mindset of like, okay, I got to get through this real fast to make it to whatever deadline we're putting on ourselves, right? It makes it so that way these stories, you're kind of like, oh, like, come on, like, let's keep going. What's the important part? But if we're slowing down with these, I really feel like they're really great. Like, you want to sit, like how you guys were saying earlier, like you want to sit with these characters for a while. And like even Eddie, he's like one of my favorites, like just because he's like Brooklyn guy, like I'm from New York too, you know, with, like the accent, like I really have a lot of fun with those. But I can understand if it's like you're reading this and then you got to read this and then you got to read this. Yeah. You know, like it makes it like harder to sit with those stories and have fun with it. And I don't know, like I had a lot of fun, but I'm also not like trying to put that much pressure to read them. Like I'm just trying to like have fun with them because, like I said, the stories are fun. Like, I don't know, like they're just a good time for me.
Yeah, I really, I mean, I enjoyed pretty much all the books. But yeah, like you said, after you read in Wizard and Glass and then you go on the Woods with the Calla, and they're big books. And I think that's why I like the next one. So I really enjoyed it because it's a small book, you know, comparative. And so you just kind of get excited. You're like, ooh, I don't have to read a 900-page book right now. You know, if you're kind of, you know, because I know Steve puts a lot of pressure on himself to do all these different books. And, you know, if you're kind of getting that mindset, you know, maybe seeing a smaller book coming up, you're like, oh, it's a little bit of a break. But, you know, but if you really like books like this, it doesn't, like you said, like for me, and I know most of you said like it read fast. You know, and I think that's when someone says a book reads fast, that means you are enjoying the the book more. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I was pumped. I was excited. I was riding my high of Wizard and Glass that I was just so excited. And I made my little list of everything I'm going to read before I read Wolves of Calla. And it had all this build up because I was going to see these little Easter eggs or whatever everybody else was talking about. And I was excited that it was this huge because I'm enjoying the story. I'm enjoying the journey. I'm not a rereader, so I don't know if I'll ever reread these. But I like don't want it to end either. So when I saw that song, this is going to be the unpopular thing to say, I think, but when Song of Susanna is so small, I'm like, that's all we get. So there's only 2 left, and then the keyhole. It's almost over, guys.
And that one's tiny.
Yeah, it's like a novella.
Yeah.
So let's dig into the story itself. So we get a new character who joins the ka-tet here, Father Callahan, who. So one of the new concepts that's brought up here, we meet the rest of our ka-tet through doorways, right? And then you've also in the last book we got the thinny, and now we have this whole new thing where people are able to kind of where the worlds are connected in a way, and that's what did they call it again? Where they could pass back
Was
in,
it
back
Todash?
now you have Todash.
Oh, yeah.
So you got these 3 different ways that the thinny kind of distorts the reality that you're in, and then you have the doorway, which allows you to pass into other worlds, and then you have Todash. It's almost like a dream state where you could go visit other places while you're dreaming. So I'm imagining, and correct me if I'm wrong, imagining that in Todash your physical body is still there, and your spiritual self is traveling, or did I misunderstand that?
I think you're right, although there is some physicality to it. Like they were worried about Susanna's cutting her feet and bringing back an infection, and then people would like step around them so they could sense them there somehow physically. But
Yeah.
it did seem more of like an astral projection kind of thing.
Wasn't it like Roland was seeing them going Todash the first time, and it was like sort of like they were like blinking in and out or something? Like he was seeing them like sort of fuzzy, so like their bodies were still there, but like in and out or something. And then that's when he knew. He's like, oh yeah, they're Todash right now. I'll just wait till they come back. But and then that's when Eddie and Jake were like in New York, and they're like, wait, you here? Oh, I'm here too. What's up? Like, let's go on this mission together.
So
yeah,
I was just gonna say the Todash thing. Was that tied to the box, or was that so there was a lot of things going on in this book, and like I said, I was rushing through it, so I think I missed a lot of things. So the box that Father Callahan kept saying, oh, you need to see this thing in the church. I kept thinking that was tied to the Todash, and then when we got it, I was like, no, that's the door. So I was
I think it is. I think the Black 13 is one of the wizard's glasses, and that's what's sending them Todash, because they're getting closer to it. But they could also use, so the doorway is a real doorway like the ones on the beach up in the cave, but they can use Black 13 to steer that doorway, like the time and the place.
So
with Black 13 you can go anywhere you want in existence.
Right.
But then it was the shrooms too.
Yeah,
it?
they could also eat it was like a muffin berry?
The muffin balls.
Muffin balls, that's what it was.
Yeah.
And that was a different way to do Todash?
Well, I think Roland said that would give you lively dreams, so that probably helped facilitate it. But I think their proximity to Black 13 was what was really boosting that. And if you remember, when they were in New York through Todash, everything looked dark, even though they were in the day, because they were kind of seeing it through Black 13.
Okay.
That was my interpretation.
No, that makes sense.
Joseph, you were going to say something about Todash before I interrupt you?
Oh, well, I was just going to say, like, we were wondering about, like, whether you're actually physically there or not. And there was something in there where they were seeing, like, they were seeing dead people.
Oh, that was cool.
Oh, that's
or they were like, I don't know if they were ghosts or what, but I know Roland said he knew what they were. I'm trying to, I forget exactly what he was saying what they were, but they noticed them when other people would walk around them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there was a lot of weird stuff going on when they were toe dashing.
Mm-hmm.
The Vagrant Dead.
Oh yeah.
There you go.
That's what they were. Yeah. So Derry says, I agree. A book that reads fast is when your brain is too involved in the story to notice the passing of time. Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. And I think, looking back, this book did read fast when I was reading it. It was just one of those books where I was just like, okay, I'll read, 50 pages. Whereas there's other books where I sit down and I'm like, I just read 200 pages and, how did I do that? This wasn't one of them. And like I said, it was just because I was not in the right mindset. I can't really go back and say there was anything wrong with it. I can't even tell you, oh, there was this part where the tangent that I thought was boring, because there wasn't any of that. It was just, So is there anything in particular? The Todash thing was the thing that about this book that I really found confusing, and I was hoping you guys would clarify that. And I think I understand it a little bit better. And then there were so many. It's almost like a web of plot lines that you kind of got glimpses of in the last few books that kind of came, I don't say to a conclusion, but they all came together here. And then you there, and that in essence created new things. So now we have more information that just gave us more questions. But so we've got Father Callahan who's joined us here, and we also have we're going back to the rose on the empty plot that's driving this story, and then the third thing is these wolves. Is there anything else here that was like a major? I think there's just so many things that were going on in this book too that also made it interesting, exciting, but then it was hard to keep everything in my head. Like, where does this go?
Yeah, I was gonna say that the Susanna Mia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The appearance of Mia and that whole thing was cool. I love too this book how Eddie, for me, he changed a little for me, and he was a little more of a protector, and his dialect, he was using the dialect more from Midworld, and I love that.
Yes, sir.
And Stacey, that was what I liked about this book, and maybe I don't know if I picked up on my first read or subsequent reads, but there are 3 fuses lit at the beginning of this. It was the tower, and whoever Balazar is working for, trying to buy that lot. That's one, and there's a timetable there. The wolves are coming, and then Susanna's pregnancy. Like all these 3 things, these fuses are burning the whole time, and you kind of you move away from one, and then you remember, oh, it's speeding up, and then of course time was literally speeding up in New York versus so that was another kind of timey element to it, which I loved that interweaving of like this ticking clock, this time bomb that's going to go off, and then you're right, they all kind of came together near the end, so
resulting in more. So now it's not, it's not like, okay, we took care of this, now let's move on. It's like now these events have now, even though we've come to the conclusion of those events, have now led us in, again, multiple different pathways. So it's, do we go on to the tower, or do we now go and find Susanna? And so I liked that, because it's almost kind of like at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring, where the Fellowship is now broken up, right? And it's like, where do we go? Do we go follow Frodo to Mordor, or do we go find the other hobbits? It's kind of, I liked the way that it ended, because now I'm kind of excited to go into the next. I want to know what's happening. What is happening to Susanna? All of that, you kind of, the stakes have raised now for the ka-tet, and they had all through this book. But you always kind of feel like, I don't know about you guys, but I always felt like in the last few books that the stakes were risen, but you always knew that somebody, somehow, for example, Roland was going to end up coming out of it, because we already know, like the last book was all backstory. So we knew he was going to come out of that fine, because he's there now. You just wanted to know emotionally, how did he become who he was? So it was an exciting story. But this one, we really have where all the new characters that you've gotten to know for the last 4 books, now there's risk for them. And so I liked that part of it. And it didn't come to, oh, everybody's going to be fine at the end because they're gunslingers and they're just going to kick butt. And they did. But, so that was really cool to read.
And Jake in this one. Oh,
I loved Jake in this one.
Yeah.
Just his relationship, wanting to be a kid, but also having this immense responsibility, and then finding out about the dad of his friend, and that whole storyline there was fun for me and sad.
So Steve says here, the end of Wizard and Glass turned me off, and I didn't want to be a Debbie. I'm curious, what particular thing?
I could tell
Was
you.
it the Wizard of Oz
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the same thing would have happened with this one, because it's the thing that annoyed me about the end of this book was Stephen King writing himself into the book.
That was so funny.
It was too much. For me, it was like, oh, you don't need to do that. It was so good.
Like, good
And-
promotion.
It's like only Stephen King can do, and I don't know if it's just me, but I can see him sitting there on his computer like, you know what this story needs? It needs me in it. It's just like, that's gonna be great. They think they've seen weird stuff yet, But
I love that.
and then he just throws. Yeah, I don't know, like, because like you said, if the Wizard of Oz thing threw him off, then he's like, you know what? Let's spice up some Harry Potter, some Star Wars.
Even Jacob's like, who's Harry Potter?
As
That
soon
part
as
kind
Steve
of
said that about
annoyed
Wizard
me.
of Oz, I was like, oh, he's gonna hate the Doctor Doom, Harry Potter, lightsaber stuff.
Yeah,
That's
I
what
can't say
when
that
I
I
first
really
read it, that
cared
was the
for
thing that turned me off about it. I was like, every time I would think about the series, I was like, oh, the Doctor Doom Harry Potter book. Like that was how this book stuck in my
wow.
head. But now I'm over that.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just such a short part of the book,
Mhm.
and I kind of took it for what it was and kind of tongue-in-cheek funny stuff
Mhm.
that he added, but I know that would have wrecked Steve.
But yeah,
Well,
it's
so-
so funny
Yeah, they just made me laugh. I was just like, oh God, here he goes.
because he
Go ahead,
totally it doesn't feel like a joke. He's just like, we're gonna write this in,
Mhm.
wink, wink, but we're gonna make it as serious as possible.
So now you're gonna read 5 more books of mine before you get to the next one.
So
Sell
I
them
have a
books.
theory on this, and I don't know if this is totally original. I'm sure other people that have analyzed this said the same thing. But if you go take it to a deeper layer, this whole series is Stephen King's love story or love letter to the art of storytelling. So he's obviously clearly a fan of the Tolkien Lord of the Rings stuff. But by pulling in these other, first of all, every chance these characters get, they love to sit down and tell each other stories. In fact, Roland even talks about how back in Gilead, telling stories was an art, and and you even see in this one, like, he's excited to get back to people's stories. Like, it's the one thing he'll kind of engage and get enthusiastic about. But I think kind of the meta thing about the whole Wizard of Oz and Doctor Doom and all of that is those are also other types of stories. So I think Stephen King is not adding these in just to be like a surface level joke, like, did you catch the reference? But that he's saying, like, storytelling in and of itself is a magic, and this magic is kind of like infusing together, that every story is a universe of its own magic, and you're just kind of folding in on each other in this story.
Well,
Absolutely.
yeah, I also think it's definitely that. I mean, because he made this whole thing off of somebody else's work, their poem, and he always references back to that in other poems, and and other quotes from other authors and stuff. So yeah, I think you're dead on.
No, yeah, he definitely does pay respect, because he's even in Callahan's story, he's like, oh yeah, I was reading this guy's book while I was on the bus, or I'm referencing, like, he makes a lot of references, not just to himself, but it's just funny, like, to see that, but to other people. And I found myself looking up those books too, and I was like, who's he talking about here? And I'll start looking it up and like read a little bit about him. And I thought that's pretty cool, because it's like you're showing, a lot of people always ask authors, like, who influenced you, what was your influence, and he's actually including them into the story and like giving them those shout outs and letting people know, like, these are the classics that really influenced even just this character, how this character is framed, or even just this character, there's this set of works that would remind somebody of whatever, like this person, like, he includes those, so that way, like I was looking them up and finding more interest in those, and people I've never heard of, maybe Like I just never heard of some of these people, and it was just cool to do. Like I always find myself, even when you were mentioning everything's eventual and hearts, I'm over here like writing it down. I'm like, what is that? Like, so like I like that. I thought it was cool, and it just shows that respect that he has. But also just acknowledging the fact that he is a very popular author too. Like I think he knows his place in our world, or the effects that his works has, or even just acknowledging the fact that he has such a popular audience that they want to connect the dots between his books. I mean, how many blogs are talking about all the books? This book is in the series because of this. This book is in the series because of that. You know, like it's just like you said, tying it all in together and just paying that respect, I think, to everybody. I think that's pretty cool. I liked it.
There was a Sherlock Holmes too. Studying.
Oh yeah, the Sherlock Holmes too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I thought it would have been neat though, because his fans know his work so well, that if they had named books that were obviously Stephen King books but had a different name, maybe, you know, that would have been, because, you know, we kept coming to that point where, you know, the books that Charlie the Train, was it Charlie?
Yeah.
If that one had a different author on it, that would have been neat. But I think it was just that Stephen King was on the bestseller list, right? And just had his author's name. It wasn't even a certain book. But it's like, yeah, we know,
dude.
except for the whole Salem's Lot thing at the end, where one of the books that got brought over is Callahan's story.
Mm-hmm.
So, that was weird.
And even Callahan's like, wait, that's me. Why am I here?
Yes.
Am I real? Am I fake?
Yeah, I think that's
real.
Yeah, I think
I have to admit that was important.
Like, it was like bringing people's reality, and I thought that was one of the best parts of the book.
I like that.
Where everyone's like, "Are we real? Mm-hmm. Like, are we? Aren't we?" And then it was like, "Well, we're real for sure, but someone's creating us, so can we mess with that?" You know, I love that. I love that aspect of it. I mean, if you're gonna go into the weird, you know, meta thing, I mean, that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
It's like Russian nesting dolls, right? We're reading this book, and Father Callahan is telling us a story, and within that story, there's also the book about his story. I liked that. It's kind of like those pictures where it's like somebody taking a picture in a mirror, which you could see them taking the picture in the mirror and see them taking the picture in the mirror. It kind of reminded me of that. I liked that.
So what we're not seeing right now is someone is reading a story about all of us, talking about this story, which is about characters. It just keeps going back.
It's a very boring book, though. There's a scene in there with just us laughing at ourselves on video.
I say too that speaking of storytelling, the part where the grandparent kept telling the story, and we never knew what he said. And
come on.
I was writing notes, and I was writing, what did grandparent say? I was so frustrated.
19 words.
So, that was like, that made it good, you know. But I really want to.
Stephen King does both things very well, where he'll tell you in advance something is going to happen. Like the thing that was in the bag that they found was sewn into the bag, and they said Eddie never checked it then. Susanna would be the one that eventually found it, but of course she'd be gone by then. Like he way foreshadowed that. But then, like grandparent's story or parts of the plan that, you know, he was holding that back from us. So we got to find out along with the rest of the village, and so he walks both lines pretty well, I think. Some people hate his foreshadowing, but
I really liked it.
I don't have a problem with it. I think it's because he gives you just enough to know that something's going to happen, but you don't know how it's going to happen. So I think it gives you something to kind of look forward to. It's like, oh, really? What? You know, what do you mean Suzanne's gone? You know, now you have to read 4 books to find out. But, how many of you guys predicted that they were going to be robots. Because at some point I did, and I don't know what clued me into that, but I had a feeling that they were going to be robots.
I kind of
Nobody?
had a feeling too because of the whole Blaine thing. And then the robot going around the Andy, was it Andy or
Andy,
Andy, yeah,
awesome character.
who was a
he was
jerk?
fun.
He was awesome.
Yeah.
What is your password?
Yeah. Many other functions. Would you like to hear your fortune?
You want your horoscope?
Oh my god! But I love that whole thing where they have to go and figure out what the kid's dad's doing and in the building and what's going on with the building. That that was a great part. And then figuring out what Andy actually was. That was what was getting me. I was like, I want to know what you were actually made for, And I can't say that I called that they were going to be robots, but I knew that robots always. This had the feeling of that story with the bear and everything. So I knew there were going to be robots or some kind of thing somewhere, but no, I didn't call that the writers were going to end up being robots.
Yeah, I didn't. I tried my best not to try to figure it out and just kind of roll with it because I had like a few theories. I was like, they're either wolves, right? Because they kept calling them the wolves, or they could have been, they're talking about Callahan's story. I was like, okay, they're vampires, right? Then Jake goes into the thing, and I was like, okay, they're zombies. Like I kept changing what they were.
Well, I kept thinking about all the kids that come back and they're gigantic, but I thought they were stealing some kind of chemical and making superhumans, so I thought maybe that's what it was.
I thought too they might be connected in some way, or they might actually be the low men in the yellow coats. Like I thought they were going to have something to do with that, like that it was them, or we would get more of what those guys are. But no. Robots.
Have you read Hearts in Atlantis yet?
Yes.
Okay.
I have not. You told me to read it before the next book, so I'm going to read it next.
It's a good book.
Wait, so that one
I'm
has
having a
to
hard time.
come before Songs of Susanna?
I
According to
think
Jeff Lane.
yeah. So here's where I get a little confused. Song of Susanna and Dark Tower blend together for me. Like 6 and 7 feel like one gigantic book to me, so I can never remember which events happen in which one. So if you read it before Song of Susanna, you'll definitely be all set. You may not need some of that information until you get to book 7.
Oh, but there were things from Hearts in Atlantis in Wolves of Calla, so you'll pick that up. After.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I read Salem's Lot last year. It was not my favorite Stephen King book. And so I was kind of, at that time, I was like, man, what a waste of 600 pages of reading time. But then reading this, I was like, okay, I can, like
Redeemed.
Brandy was saying, it was like Salem's Lot Part 2. You know what? If what happened to Father Callahan after had been in Salem's Lot, it would have been a much better book. Like him finding the lesser, what did he call them? The lesser vampires or the low men? I can't remember now what he called them.
Well, there's multiple different things, right, Jeff? There's the low men, then there's
So there's low men, there's type 1, type 2, and type 3 vampires.
Yeah, he didn't give them a name. He just said, type 1, 2, and 3.
See, if all that had happened,
and I can't remember if the Taheen are the low men. I'm getting a little fuzzy with all the different categories, but yeah.
And you kind of also get to know what happened to some other main characters from Salem's Lot too, like the writer, I forget his name, the guy that's the writer and the kid, yeah.
And that was one of the things about Salem's Lot that really frustrated me. Is at the very beginning of the book, you're in the future, right? So it's Ben and the boy in Mexico, and the boy decides that he befriends a priest, and all that happens, and then you find out, something happened in this place called Jerusalem Lot, and you go back to the story, and then there's not anything that says what happened. He says in the very beginning, we have to go back. It's like, go back to what? did you go back? What happened when you went back? So there was a lot of things about Sandlot that irritated me. So I really liked that part of this book because it helped, even though it wasn't really about Ben and the boy, I can't remember his name. It helped. Yeah, it helped me. Some of those missing pieces, even though I didn't get all of the story, it helped me a little bit with that. And I really liked Father Callahan's story. And, this once again as a character that I think Stephen King wrote as a self-portrait of himself, another character that struggles with alcoholism. And but I liked that take on that kind of character. He has these characters in a lot of his books, right? Whether it's alcoholism or as some other kind of addiction. But I really liked how Father Callahan, his whole story really about hitting rock bottom and all the things that happened to him, and then the way he finds his purpose again. I really liked that.
And that rock bottom scene was like, people always talk about hitting rock bottom. That was my worst night. When you hear all the things that, he falls down and breaks his jaw again, and he poops his pants, and he's like, okay, now I really know what rock bottom is. Like that described it pretty well.
I was like, yeah, you're there. No, but you can really see that he truly understands what it feels like to be in that predicament, or like that position with the alcoholism and stuff. Like that's the impression that I really got, because as someone who doesn't deal with that, like just occasionally like have a drink or two, it doesn't grip me the way that I see it how it grips other people that are having that problem. And like me from the outside looking at that, I'm like, I couldn't truly understand what another person's going through, and having that description of Father Callahan and like how his addiction is just really grappling him, even with what was it that he was saying about his love interest, right? How it would be like he was pissing on his grave or something like that if he were to take another drink, and then he still did it anyways. And like and just having that thought in my head, I was like, wow, like it really grips him like that. And I wouldn't have thought of it that way. And then seeing that just helps me kind of understand and have a little more sympathy for it, and wanting to, it's like I wanted to help him. But obviously I can't do that anything, but it just made me understand his character a lot better.
You guys are making me feel really self-conscious about taking another sip from my beer right now.
the last conversation.
Don't worry, guys. This might be Irish.
Ah, there you go.
The last, I think in Wizard and Glass, my mug had cider. So we're good. We're good.
But I love the backstory. He's kind of the vampire hunter, type deal. But the way he did it didn't make him, Stephen King didn't make him like Van Helsing or anything. It was just, just like your everyday guy, But then I love the messaging where they were getting closer and closer to him, and they didn't know his name, but they were like describing him on sides of buildings and like the little graffiti. And I'm like, you kind of got that dread. Signs. Yeah. Like, have you seen my dog? Or something like that, right? I think that's how some of them. Yeah.
But how anonymous was that? I thought that was really clever to do that. Like me walking down the street seeing a lot. I mean, I'm such an animal lover. I'd be like, oh, where's this animal? But, the everyday person would see it as just like another sign. You kind of take a glance and you keep it pushing. But then, for the people that are really looking, like what a really great way to disguise this message. It's like a little dog whistle, Yeah. I thought that was really clever. I thought that was cool.
I think Stephen King putting that in there is, like you said, it was a genius, because it almost makes you think like, well, when I see stuff like that, am I missing stuff in real life that are people like some underground thing is going on here?
I guarantee
Yes.
you probably go around and start adding up numbers from now on and go,
The
it's 19.
number 23. I seen that movie with Jim Carrey. Oh my god.
In fact,
So-
as I was wrapping up the audiobook today, they were giving the credits at the end, and the like the engineer was like Terry Hogan. I was
Yeah.
like, the Hogan. And then I looked at the time on the audiobook, and the audiobook was 25 hours and 48 minutes, which adds up to 19.
Oh my God.
Everything is 19.
What was that, Brandy?
You listened to the audiobook for this one?
I did, yeah.
Yeah,
I did both.
And I was really nervous because it was it's the same guy that did the Gunslinger, right? Which I thought was good, but then you have and so I was
Thank
nervous.
Calla.
It was really good still.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't do Eddie as good, but it was good. I didn't miss a beat with it. I thought he did
Yeah.
great.
I went back to back, and I didn't throw me off at all.
Yeah.
Did you guys listen to the author's note at the end where he talks about Frank Muller's accident? And
Yeah.
Mhm.
It broke my heart.
Yes, sad.
I felt so sad.
Yeah. And then,
speaking of sorry, go ahead, Joseph.
oh no, go ahead.
I was saying, speaking of accidents, just to put this in context, he wrote this one, 5, 6, and 7 in a tear after he recovered from his accident getting hit by the car.
Yeah.
So this was another thing, and he talks about it in interviews, that he kind of realized that accident was probably very close to ending him, and therefore he would have had an unfinished Dark Tower saga. So I think it put the idea of his mortality in his brain. So he very quickly, after dragging out 1 through 4 and having fans go, please finish this, tell me what's going to happen, he went boom, boom, boom with 5, 6, 7 and wrote them very quickly. And that's probably why 6 and 7 blend a lot in my head too. And he mentions that in the author's note too, that this one's done, and then 6 and 7 are in rough draft form at the time of his recording that.
Well, and they actually came out like either the same year, Song of Susanna and the Dark Tower came out either the same year or back to back.
Very quickly, yeah.
Yeah. And I think some people's problem with the last, because they always say, if you've watched book 2, they're always like, the last 2 books kind of are where people get iffy, and you can, even though the last book is like one of the longest books I've ever read in my life, it's still, you almost felt like with the Game of Thrones where they had 2 years to put those together, and you're like, oh, the last season felt short, felt like they chopped it way too quickly. And even though that last book is super long, I kind of feel like that a little bit. Like he could have put another book, maybe made that last book shorter, and then did another book. And yeah, because he like you said, he was feeling like I'm mortal. It could, I don't want to leave people with unfinished work.
He should
Patrick
write a note to
Rothfuss and George R. R. Martin.
George R.
felt
R.
that way.
Martin.
Although I think I've given up on those. I like if those books came out tomorrow, I would have to read all of the books that came before again, and I don't know if I feel that kind of commitment.
I have a theory. About that. I have a theory of either he has written nothing, or he is completely done.
I think he's done.
I think either he did it so big, he's like, I don't need to worry about it, or they've been done, and he's just going to release them at whenever, like either post, whenever he passes, he's gonna be like, now we can release these out, or something like that, because he's working on all kinds of other stuff. And I'm just like, I have a sneaky suspicion you're already done with these books.
I think it's one of two things. I think it got so big for him because there's so many characters and so many plot lines. And even Stephen King mentions like he had to use Robin Firth as his researcher to help rein him in as he finished this series. I wonder if George R. R. Martin, it just got too big and too long. I'll admit, I have a hard time remembering details from my books. Someone messaged me the other day about, I saw what you did with those 2 names. That was pretty clever. And I was like, I don't remember those 2 names. What did I do? So I had to look up my own work to figure out what this person was referencing. I was like, oh yeah. So I think it just got too big for George R.R. Martin, or like a lot of authors, it's hard to stick the landing. Like it's hard to, especially the big, like writing an ending for a book. Okay, I've invested X amount of pages, X amount of word count, whatever. So my ending needs to value that work. But when you put in the time and effort that George R.R. Martin or Stephen King put into these mega series, then you've got to make that ending. I think in the author said the ending has to be proportionately as big or as good to stick the landing. I wonder if George R.R. Martin is like stuck on that. Like, how do I?
Well,
I know I'll kill Daenerys. I'll have
in
Jon
his
Snow kill
case-
Daenerys.
Yeah. In his case, he knows what not to do. I mean, he
There you
knows
go.
he knows the ending everyone hated. So he's like, well, at least they chopped off one section where I know I'm not gonna go. You know, but
What
like
if he had that in there, and then after it aired, he was like, "Oh, backspace, backspace, backspace."
Billy. But I know exactly. I mean, like Jeff said, I'm actually in the process of writing my third book, and I'm having to, and it's all in the same universe, you know, but different kind of stories. So now I'm having to go back into the second and into the first book to make sure that descriptions of certain type of creatures or whatever match. And I'm like, okay, I got to keep everything consistent, you know. So when you have these gigantic books, it's like,
That's
you know,
hard.
you got to have good beta readers or whatever to be like,
Yeah.
that's not the way the person looked from 4 books ago. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh,
Even us,
Even-
like we watch The Office like over and over again, and we'll catch stuff like, wait, that's not what he said over here, or you know what I mean? Like we'll catch stuff. Like me and my husband, like we catch stuff all the time. But this is the first time I'm reading through these books, so I'm just kind of going on for the ride. But I do plan like in the future to reread it, and then like I'd be able to like catch, like, oh yeah, this, oh yeah.
So Derry
You know?
says here that Elio Garcia and Linda Atonason do the internal fact checking for George.
Oh, good.
Nice.
Even
That
he
would
had.
be a
I
great
can't remember which.
job. I want that job. You get to like read people's books and then keep
You just
them
have to know
honest.
every detail. Like, no, Daenerys was wearing a singlet that had 3 buttons, and
yeah, you have to be the super fan, you know, to.
But even George
Okay,
Martin,
so-
I can't remember which 2 books it was, but he had it as one massive book, and it was just so big that he actually had to take. I can't remember which 2, but there's
it was
one book. It's
3
like
and 4.
half the cast is missing for the whole book,
Mhm.
and
It's
then the
number
next
4.
book, it's the other half. Yeah, it's 3 and
Mhm.
4, and then because that was all one big book at one time, and then he realized, all right, I'll tell half the cast story and then do the other half. So
I
maybe he's
hated
just
that.
getting too big.
It's too much.
That's one thing I did want to ask you guys about, you know, a lot about the Dark Tower books, or I guess could be any at this point, any books in general that are this large. Do you think that they would be better if they were like cut in half, or he just specifically went on the side and said these are all in the same Dark Tower storyline, but this is a novella for what, you know, for Callahan, you know, Dark Tower Callahan, or whatever you wanted. I mean, how would you feel if he did that instead of making these monster books and just filling everything in?
Well, Anne Rice did that with her vampire series for a while. She had kind of the main Vampire Chronicle line that was kind of basically Lestat's story, but then she would have these spin-off like Vittorio and Pandora and these other. So she had kind of in-universe side quest stories that were, I remember what she called them, but they weren't Vampire Chronicles. They were something else. So that definitely is a model that works, I think.
That's a really interesting question, though. Like now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, would I have enjoyed these? You know, oh, we lost Stacy. But I'm just like, would we have enjoyed these if they were shorter? Or I don't know. I don't know, because I'm liking it the way it is. You know, like having these stories interjected and like everything's tying together and not having to look for it in other books. I think that's why I'm appreciating like having even like Callahan's story, Grand Pierre, this thing with Mia coming in. Like I like it in the same story and not having to worry about now I got to find 10 other books to get into this storyline, you know? Like I think I like it here. Like it's pretty like concise for me.
I'm with you, Ursi. I'm a
Mhm.
completionist, and I
Mhm.
love to follow along enumeration and not miss anything. And
Yeah.
even like something like the Netflix Marvel series, like
Man.
there's Daredevil season 1, 2, and 3, but you can't watch them that way. You have to watch Daredevil season 1 and then
Mhm.
Luke Cage
Punisher.
and Jessica Jones. Like you have to jump around, and I
Mhm.
look up and make sure, okay, do I do it in the right order?
Yeah.
So I do. I like enumeration. I like having like a
Mhm.
straight beginning to
Yeah.
end,
Or like
rather
Star
than
Wars.
figure out is this book before this one. Or,
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm not afraid of a huge, epic-sized book. So
Mhm.
wonder what the perfect number is, though. Like, there's trilogies. Everybody likes trilogies. Those are good.
Mhm.
There's a lot of 7-book series out there. What's too much?
Well, I mean, my favorite book series is already 17 books long, and every time I come back to it, I think it all depends on what kind of story you're trying to tell.
Mhm.
You know, like the Dresden Files, for example. The longest book is Cold Days, and that's like, I don't know the page count, but it's 180,000 words, which I think the final book in the Dark Tower series is something like 300,000, something close to that. So, and like all the Malazan books are the smallest ones 240,000 or something like that. So it all depends, and how many characters you're going to have and bring in and stuff. But I feel like most people, the number 3, the trilogy, beginning, middle, end, is in people's heads. So, what is it? Joe Abercrombie likes doing that. He likes doing trilogies within the same universe, and then same universe but different trilogy. So, I think
But
that's
even
probably
with go ahead.
good.
Okay, well, I was gonna say even with these books, like even though it's like what 7.5 books, right? It's not that many characters though, and I like that. Like
Yeah,
it's not
me
like
too.
I have to have like a list. Like even with with this one, like I'm starting it now, and there's like 3 pages of a list of characters, and I'm like,
20,
what am I getting into?
you followed 20 or 30 characters, and that was my whole thing with the book, and that's why I'm gonna go back over it, because I'm in my mind like, maybe I'm just not cultured enough to have read all these other type of books that have a million characters, because I like Dresden Files and Dark Tower and The Witcher, where you're not following more than like 5 people maybe throughout the book, and it's a lot of first person POV. Where this one, you're like, I'm everywhere, like and I'm like, my
Sorry,
brain does
guys,
not compute.
I lost the internet for a minute there. I don't want us to cut this short, but there's another live stream. Steve is doing a live stream for another book that myself and Randy have to join. So to close up here, before we go around on ratings, one thing we hadn't really talked about here is Susanna and her pregnancy and her additional personality. So I want to quickly ask you guys your opinion, what you thought about that plot line, what your predictions are possibly for her storyline, and what happens to the ka-tet going forward. We'll start with you, Brandy, so that if you have to jump off, you can jump off.
okay, well, it confused me a little because they talk about. For me, I thought it's another Susanna Detta, personality. But then they kind of give you this feeling that it's not. It's a totally different person living in. I don't know, because I was confused about that whole thing. But I did like that she protected her and her baby. But then I guess I was holding on to hope that it's not a demon. but I guess it probably is. I don't know. But that whole thing confused me at first. It still kind of confuses me, but she's going to get Susanna through it. So I kind of like her for that, but also she's taking Susanna away. I don't know. Too much.
Well, I when it comes to that character, I kind of felt like it was fitting for the Mia to show up, because obviously I'm not a psychotherapist or anything like that, but immediately whenever, I think in the drawing of the three, I was like, okay, this character has what is it? Dissociative identity disorder, right? Or before it was called like multiple personality disorder or something like that, right? But each of these kind of personalities can be brought forth because of like trauma, or like born through trauma. And like her trauma was bringing Jake through the portal and having to do this thing with that demon, right? And that's sort of like this new trauma that kind of brought out Mia, you know, kind of digging her way through and trying to be this mother figure, because that's how Mia sees herself. Is like, I am the mother of this child and I will do whatever I need to get the nutrients for this child, eating frogs. but
I love how Eddie's like, please don't let her have eaten that child. Or
I know.
I know. But yeah, I just really liked how that, like, it's fitting that happened, because even with Odetta and Detta display, it was with the brick, right? Like that was one trauma that happened to her, and then that's how the other one came out. And now with this new thing going on, that's like how she's able to come out, and it's like the personality suits what happened to her. And even though it's like we don't want to have Mia taking control, but there's this like power conflict between Susanna and Mia, and their acknowledgement of each other and being like, just let me finish this battle and then you can do whatever you want and like be the mother. I don't care. Just let me finish this. Let me help these guys. But it was, I don't know. I thought that was pretty cool, like clever.
Joseph?
What do you guys think?
Well, with the whole Mia thing, I wasn't a huge fan of it in this book. Just I don't know. Just I did like how it seemed like when Mia took over, and I'm still not 100% sure about this, but like when she goes into the castle and starts eating, I'm like, does Mia know she's out in the swamp eating rats and frogs? But she's making Susanna think that she's in a castle, So I thought that was pretty interesting. But you kind of knew that this was going to blow up at the end of the book. But it gets a lot better, in my opinion, like as we go on to the next book.
I liked it as a story element because we were in the dark a little bit. Is it Eddie's baby? Is it a real baby? Is it a demon? Is it going to kill her? Like all of these, and is it going to interfere with the battle? Had that ticking time bomb kind of feel, and it also sets up a good bit of conflict between Father Callahan and Roland, just because Father Callahan's like, no abortion, don't do it. So there's, we know Roland knows how to do that already. We've already seen him give one abortion in The Gunslinger. So it's I liked it as a story element, and it propels us into the next book. That's this is our cliffhanger moment from this book into the next, which I liked.
So I think it's funny because for the woman reader, it sounds like the three women here, we were more looking at it as a female, or in some cases a mother. I don't know, Ursi, if you're a mother, but so one of the things that I was getting frustrated is when she started feeling the cramps. What's happening. I mean, anybody who's ever watched TV where there's a pregnant woman, and it's like, will you tell somebody that you're in friggin' labor? Right?
She's
I
like,
just
no,
can't-
I'm okay. I just,
Okay.
I ate a little something.
Just gas.
I'm pretty sure that I'm gonna give birth to a demon, but
Well,
just gonna
it was
throw
easy
some
for her
plates, okay?
it's easy for her to be in denial because she had so many other things telling her she wasn't pregnant. Like, so I could see how it would be easy for her to say, think it away or wish it away.
Well, yeah, she just talked the pregnancy away there. For she's like, all right, I'm good. You just wait, and you get. It's almost like she bargained supernaturally for another like 2 hours. She's like, just give me 2 hours, and like that's not the way this works. That's not the way any of this works.
No, it doesn't work
But-
that way.
But I think as we read on, it gets so much better with that aspect of the story.
I can't wait.
The other aspect of the pregnancy is it was one of the things that started to splinter our ka-tet. So they were not only physically separated, Roland strategically put them in different farms and different homes so they could get different perspectives and lay of the land. But this secret was one of the things that had them stop talking to each other and stop telling each other, and that was almost breaking them apart as a group, which I didn't like seeing that happen, but I like it as a tension creating element. And what's going to happen if they can't communicate and they don't have this ka-tet between them?
Yeah. There were so many things in the story, character-wise, that were just amazing. The way that Jake's character grew, the fact that one of the things in the last book is we really understood is how similar each person in Roland's new ka-tet represent those in his younger days ka-tet. And so we see in this one that Jake is taking the place of, is it Aelin? Am I saying that right? And so I really liked that. I liked how he has this intuition and he doesn't want to really get into anybody's private thoughts, but it's just like, it's kind of like just there. And so there, he gets enough information about what's going on without having to delve into it. So he's not always in the dark, but he doesn't always know what he knows and what it means. But it was frustrating for the reader also, because you're like, man, if you guys just talk, just like the what was behind the mask on the wolves, it's like, can you just tell him you guys are? He's like, well, I'll tell him later. Like, well, that is kind of an important thing to tell somebody, and then you never do. He finds out from somebody else. So there are a lot of frustrations with that lack of communication, but it made sense to the story and to what the characters were going through, and it almost made them question that what do I need to share. So I thought that was a great, like you said, tension, a way to set tension in there, but it also made sense. It wasn't just there, that miscommunication trope that you often see in books. It didn't feel that way. It felt like it made sense. And it was always kind of like, well, this isn't quite as important as this thing, so we're going to talk about this first, and then we just never get to that. But it did make the reader, being the one who knows some of this information, it's like, come on, guys, just take 5 minutes, pull them aside, and tell them what's going on. But anyway, so we're going to wrap up this video. Oh, Brandy, do you want to say something?
I was just going to say I have to get off.
Yeah. So,
waiting
Brandy,
for
really quick, how did you rate this?
It's 5 stars for me. I mean, they're all. I think I would even go back now and give the Gunslinger a different rating, because I don't know, it's just good. I loved it.
Come with me.
A good story, and it's so different than anything I've ever read, and I'm just really enjoying it. And thank you guys.
Thanks for joining us, Brandy. So, Ursi.
So I gave it like, I'm in between 4 and 5, because I really had a lot of fun with this one. It's different from what I expected. I keep going back because I'm like, but I do want more movement. But I don't know if that's just me being selfish and trying to get to the Dark Tower. But I still had a lot of fun with this one. Like I keep thinking like I want to reread this one again, even though we're not going anywhere. Like I want to reread it and just kind of soak in everything and catch all of the little Easter eggs and stuff. But I liked it. I want to keep going.
Yeah, I would give it, if we're gonna go with if we could do half stars, I'd say 4.5. I mean, that's about where I'm at. I mean, it's definitely, top tier of books I've read all time. It's it's up in the top percentages. But again, I liked it because it kind of harkens back to the gunslinger.
I give it 5 Sneetches Harry Potter model.
Love
Out of 5.
it.
Yeah, I just love the construction of it, even though it's a side quest and it's not necessarily getting us closer to the tower. It just had a great that great feel of it. It reads fast, it goes fast. You're worried about these multiple streams coming together. It just does it for me. And again, that was my love of it has only been discovered on rereading. First time I probably would have given it like 3, because of the whole like lightsabers and stuff. But now that I've read the whole series, I appreciate it much more. And I just love this. These knights come into town. These Magnificent Seven. They have to save the town from the bad guys, and the town can't do it on their own. So I love that story. Always take that story.
Mm-hmm.
I will say one criticism though. We never get a Jake training montage. We go from him getting pulled out of the door, being raced through Lud, onto the train, through Topeka where he sits and hears Roland blabber for a while. And all of a sudden he's in the woods and he can shoot plates and we never see Jake get trained to do this. And then I thought, well, when he does book 4.5, we're going to fix all that. Spoiler alert, Jake doesn't get any training in book 4.5 either. So that's my only gripe. Like we never see Jake get trained as a gunslinger.
Man.
I just now realized that was one of the things I was looking forward to in this book. I was like, surely that's going to happen here. And it didn't.
Ruined it.
Yeah.
We got Susanna with the plates.
Yeah, I will say this. That's what I'll give this 4 out of 5 sharpened plates. I thought that was the coolest thing. Was like, whoever thought I'm gonna make some stainless steel plates and I'm gonna sharpen them into weapons.
That was
but I like
dope.
the story that kind of led to that. It's like, oh, we didn't just think, oh, the flying plates was a cool idea. It was because of the story, and I thought that was really cool. So this, like I said, 4 stars was really good for me. I think I gave all the other books before this 5 stars except for Gunslinger. So it wasn't, but the more we've talked here makes me think it might be actually a higher stars. And I think I need to go back and read it again, because it wasn't until about halfway through when those plot lines really started to come to that climax that I was like, I really started getting interested. And then I was like, oh man, I must have missed some stuff. I was trying to get through this too quickly. I didn't understand the Toadash. I didn't understand, like, there were just some things that happened, and I was like, wait, what? When, for example, when Eddie gets stuck on the other side of the door. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't Eddie. Who was it Eddie that was stuck? Not stuck on the other side of the door, they just accidentally put the book in it to keep the door from shutting.
Callahan got stuck because Eddie was
Hypnotized.
So that I was like, what happened there? How did I miss that? Because I was like, did I miss the part where Eddie walked off? Was there something that happened that so there were moments like that, and because I was just trying to get through it, I didn't really allow myself to go back and reread it, which I would have any other book, but this one I was just like, I gotta go. I have other books I gotta read. I gotta go read Joseph Carroll's book. So
hey, that's always a good choice.
I'm like 3 chapters in. I got it from my Kindle. I'm pretty excited.
Oh, great. I was just gonna say, if anybody wants to jump on and for some reason you can't buy it, I could send out an ebook if you guys needed it.
Oh,
yeah.
nice.
So those of you who are still here on the chat, Joseph Carroll, you can find him on Twitter. I put the link to his Twitter in the description box, so you can hit him up there if you want to join our read along for More Than a Vampire, which is in 2 weeks, I believe. So you have time.
Next Sunday.
Oh, is it next week? God, it's next week already.
Don't worry,
Next
it's not a
weekend.
long book. You'll get anybody who's reading it.
So you have time to grab it and join us for that show next Sunday. Of course, Jeff Lane is also on Twitter. I also have his information, and he has a bunch of great books. I highly recommend One Way. Go ahead and grab that, and you can read it, or you can listen to him read it to you in his podcast. And I don't have that link below, but I'm sure, Jeff, you might have that information for them. Can you tell them where they can find you?
Any podcast app of choice, just put in my name or One Way, and you should be able to find it. So Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, LibriVox. And LibriVox is a great one. Tons of books on there. So
Awesome.
Nice.
It's a great book. So thank all of you for joining today. And I'm looking forward to reading Songs of Susanna and to discussing that with you guys. So we will be having that the first week of March. I think it might be the same day, the 5th of March. Next month for the Songs of Susanna. It will be a shorter book, thank God, because February is a shorter month, so I gotta get all the reading in. So thank you guys for joining, and we'll see you again next week or next month. Thanks. Bye.
everyone.
Bye.